I don't know if you've noticed this one recently, but there are a lot of sequels and reboots in the gaming industry today. So praise the sun for Dark Souls, a new IP that's gotten itself a cult following, rapidly gaining in popularity by bringing old school NES hard into the modern generation of consoles. You know that when a game's tagline is, "You will die," you're in for a good time. But in our excitement over this new franchise, have we overlooked something? Are the Dark Souls games actually any good, or are they fundamentally broken and flawed? Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, welcome to Deadlock.
Vengeance will be mine!
Giant Dad, be my strength!
Any discussion of Dark Souls has to start with the difficulty. The series became famous for bringing old school difficulty into the modern day gaming scene.
Hey, just because a game is hard doesn't make it a bad game.
I wasn't going to say.
In fact, I would say that the game's extreme difficulty serves to make it one of the most immersive, all-consuming gaming experiences on modern consoles. Forget your Oculus Rifts and curved TVs. Dark Souls has you in the moment, every moment. There are countless other games with incredibly detailed dungeons and castles that I just sprinted right through on my way to the next piece of loot or quest item. I couldn't tell you a thing about the level design, but Dark Souls is burned into my mind. This isn't a game you run through your first time. This is a game you memorize. A game that has you paying attention to every floor tile, every enemy placement, and every item box.
Damn mimic boxes.
I know! It's a game with dramatic stakes. You can't get careless, which forces you to be aware of every single detail the designers put in. And isn't that the point of a game? To immerse you in another world? If so, Dark Souls absolutely does that.
Which brings me to what I was originally trying to say. A difficult game is fine if the difficulty is fair and comes from the gameplay. But Dark Souls is difficult for unfair reasons, and that unfairness ultimately undermines the immersive experience you just described. First, you have no idea where to go at any given time.
Which provides you a great experience where you're discovering and connecting with a world independent of any obvious guideposts.
Except for when it doesn't. Yes, it's great you get to discover your own path, but when the most essential item in the game also happens to be the most absurdly hidden, yeah, a little bit of direction, a clue, anything would be nice. I, of course, am talking about the rusted iron ring.
Ugh, this is gonna hurt, huh?
Oh yeah. This ring, which enables you to quickly walk through water, an ability, mind you, that is necessary for huge chunks of the game, can only be found by leaping off an elevator onto a somewhat secret platform, leaping into another ledge in a game that is far from a platformer, let's be honest, then climbing up a tower and crouching in a bird's nest so you can be flown back to the tutorial level. Without reading a strategy guide or an online tutorial, you would never know this. Same thing with saving Solier. And this is the type of obscurity that makes Dark Souls so difficult, expecting you to figure things out without getting any clues.
But can't that also be seen as the beauty of the game? The fact that it breaks gaming conventions. We, as gamers, are so trained to think in established patterns, see a red barrel, shoot it to make it explode, that we find it difficult to break from those patterns. Dark Souls is one of the only games that forces you to do that. Instead of just riding the elevator shortcut like you would in any other game, you need to pay attention to your surroundings even then. And notice that there's a break in the wall. It's an incredibly subtle clue, admittedly, but the developers also know that this is the modern era where people talk online, get stuck, and there are literally hundreds of websites out there to help you out. Think that people would be complaining so much about Ocarina of Time's water temple if the internet had existed? Well, I should say high-speed internet had existed during the time? I don't think so.
Sure, but that doesn't excuse the game for being sloppy.
Oh, okay, hey there. Let's not resort to name calling.
But it's true from the first moments of the game. For example, you get to select your starting gift. Knowing that this is a hard game, I go with a Tiny Beings ring, whose description says it slowly regenerates health. After not seeing my health go up, I read online to find out that it actually increases the amount of health you have slightly, not that you regenerate health. If it's a typo, it's sloppy. If it's on purpose, it's lying to the player.
I get that, but again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that this is a game that breaks conventions. It could have been a typo, yes, but even if it wasn't, it hammers home the point from the moment you fire up the game that this is a game out to trick you, lie to you, and ultimately kill you. Look at another of the starting gifts. The pendant. It says it has no purpose. And I sat there, staring at the screen the first time I played this game, sat there trying to decide whether or not I should choose that item. Because, let's be honest, what game has an item with no purpose? But it has been confirmed by the designers that no, the pendant truly has no use. It's just there as another trick, turning the established gaming trope of the seemingly useless item that somehow becomes important later on its head.
Okay, fine. Point being this, GLaDOS in Portal lying to you? Different because she's an unreliable narrator. NPCs in Dark Souls lying to you? Fine, it's that sort of world, I buy it. But the inventory screen being flat out wrong, that's truly unfair even for a game that breaks conventions. Because a player needs something to let them know what the rules of the world are. I want to be a pyromancer, and obviously, I see that the intelligence stat is for magic abilities. So, for my first 7 levels, I dump my experience points into intelligence. After not seeing any improvement in my character, I read online to find that pyromancy, despite it being about fire-like spells, actually has nothing to do with intelligence, and that I should be leveling up dexterity instead? Thanks, Obama, and don't even get me started on the item humanity. Perhaps the most crucial gameplay mechanic affecting everything from your stats to the way NPCs treat you, and I'm left to basically reverse engineer to figure out what the hell the programming in the game is all about. That's where the difficulty comes from, all the sources that are unfair to the gamer. But even if you inserted a halfway decent tutorial and a bit more direction into how to get and use some of these essential items at the time of when you need them, what are you left with? Lackluster fighting mechanics.
Wow! Being trapped in that game really made you angsty toward it, huh?
I was watching Egoraptor's Sequelized video on Ocarina of Time, and something occurred to me. Dark Souls has the same problems. People think Ocarina is incredible, and that Z-targeting for fighting is super exciting and immersive. But in the end, that fighting boils down to time. Wasted time waiting for the enemy to attack or to drop their guard so you can attack. Dark Souls is the same way. Block, block, hit, block, block, hit. Or if it's a boss, run around behind it, smack, 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 run around before the area of effect spell kicks in. That's practically every single enemy in the game, Matt.
I would argue that there's a little more variety than that, but even if there wasn't, that is a real experience, Jirard. Dark Souls is a game, perhaps the only game in recent history to make death matter. For those of you watching who don't know, when you die in Dark Souls, you lose all your souls, or experience points that you've accumulated since your last checkpoint. And the game forces you to start all the way back to your last bonfire. It is a punishing system. So of course you're gonna keep your shield up constantly and take lots of time with every fight you encounter, waiting for the right time to strike because death matters. It may just be one of the most realistic fighting systems in a game ever. There is this unbelievably frustrating section called Sen's Fortress that has you platforming your way all the way to the top, walking narrow pathways, avoiding traps, dealing with these really obnoxious enemies. And you finally get to the roof only to see this giant in the distance. And I stood there, watching it move, calculating whether or not this creature posed a threat to me. Because if I died at that point, I would have to go back to the first bonfire I was at and start all over again. But that, Jirard, is fear. That is stakes. And that is good game design. Design that gets you to care about what happens to your character.
So then what did happen, Matt?
I died when a giant hidden behind me threw an explosive boulder.
Cheap death, Matt. Cheap death.
Perhaps. But in those moments where I was frantically trying to find the next bonfire while on fire, those were perhaps the most engaged I had been in a game in a long time. And at the end of the day, what qualifies as a good game to me? It's a game that's immersive and makes me feel something. Is Dark Souls immersive? You betcha. We talked about that at the beginning. But does it give you the feels? Absolutely. Because you're given so little information, it keeps you hungry for the next clue as to what the heck is going on in this world.
But ultimately, it doesn't tell you anything in the end, alright?
Quiet you, this is my closing argument. Even though it doesn't tell you all that much in the end, that's what's so exciting. It lets the player come up with their own interpretations, which has resulted in a vibrant and active fan community. Dark Souls is challenging, not just from a difficulty sense, but very much like a complex piece of art. You chew on it, you think about it, digest it, discuss it. It's an empty vessel that the player gets to fill in. This game is truly a roller coaster of emotions. You're tense practically the whole time. You get frustrated, you rage quit, you come back, you learn, you get better, and finally you triumph, and the sense of achievement is incredible. But beyond just gameplay, there are moments that are legitimately shocking, fearful, even moments that I found incredibly sad. I don't think I've ever wanted to give up on a fight more than I did with Sif the Great Wolf, once this little creature started limping around the arena. That attention to detail couldn't be in a game anyone would consider sloppy. Couple those things with incredible enemy design and an atmosphere that is just oppressive the whole game, and you have maybe not what many people would call a fun game, but you have an incredibly rewarding one.
But a game still has to be playable and enjoyable to play in order for it to be good, Matthew. Players shouldn't have to reverse hack the programming algorithms to figure out the effects of items or stats, and they certainly shouldn't be lied to about what an item does by the inventory screen. Combat shouldn't be this repetitious slog, and it should be all worth something. The ending of Dark Souls is the modern-day equivalent of congratulations, a hard, tedious slog that results in an ending that isn't satisfying and doesn't bring you any closure. You compared the game to an empty vessel that players fill in. I got the reverse. By the time I finished the game with the lackluster boss fight and obtuse endings, I was the one feeling left empty.
Wow. That was a really depressing ending. Like Dark Souls! Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, we have reached Deadlock. Now the decision is in your hands. Who's number one and who's number none? Click on the person you think argued it the best, or click the link in the description to cast your vote and settle this debate once and for all.